Iowa's rivers too high. The Mississippi now reaching record levels, but the Des Moines has also become a critical problem.
This is a mandatory evacuation of all personnel south of Monument.
It's about 3:30 in the morning right here. They have built a large dike across the intersection here to hold back the water. On the other,
Gary, we plugged everything up over there, man, best we can.
I need a bagger right here.
We're going to do everything we can to be there.
It's like this is a bad dream, and all we can do is hope and pray. That's all we can do.
So. We still have a very serious condition on our hands.
They said if we can get her done, hold it off, they'll have water back in the pipes in a week. The water's coming up pretty fast, so we're asking them to leave.
Keep the wake down. So okay, let's...
But again, the water is coming faster and faster than they ever expected. Streets are absolutely flooded.
This is as serious as it gets.
The thought of losing what we've built is just unbelievable.
the sights, the sounds, the images that are etched in the minds and hearts of all of us who were a part of the flood of '93. Hi, I'm Kevin Cooney. As a reporter and anchor for TV8, I've covered many stories that touched and changed the lives of Iowans, but I don't think that any of them can compare to the stories of courage, love, help, and survival that unfolded day after day in the flood of '93. Now, Iowa has seen its share of flooding over the years, but nothing of the magnitude of the flood of '93. Water everywhere, and that water spread higher and farther than in any past flooding. That was bad enough, but it was the second massive blow to our city that really made history, that put us in the national spotlight and mobilized our community like never before. The blow that qualified the flood of '93 as the worst disaster in our state was the loss of our water.
About 3:30 this morning, we ended up losing the battle of keeping the Raccoon River out of the treatment plant. We'd been working for the last 2 days to add additional dirt to the top of our levee system, and we just could not keep up with the rapid rising of the Raccoon River. As a result of the rise, the river flowed into the treatment plant and actually submerged the treatment plant within the river.
At no other time in American history had so many people been without water for so long. Many natural disasters come quickly with little or no warning. That wasn't the case, though, with the flood of '93. For most of us, the bulk of the damage happened on July 11th, but it took a number of events hitting at the wrong time and the wrong place to set the stage for the flood of '93.
I remember the night it all began. That was Thursday, July 8th. We'd had a severe thunderstorm watch all day for most of Iowa. At about 6 o'clock, a line of thunderstorms reached all the way across the state. We've been watching on the screen. One of the most intense lines I've ever seen. By the time the night was over, Don and I were here till about 3 o'clock. And that's when it finally got quiet. But between the time it began and the time it all ended, about 7 to 8 inches of rain had fallen within a very small 4 to 6 county area. You can imagine that after a 7 or 8 inch rain, everything was full. And the next day was quiet, thank goodness, and we all thought maybe the storms were over for a while. But by the time the 3 and 4 inch rains fell again Saturday night, there was absolutely no place for it to go. The ground was saturated, the creeks and rivers were full, we were already at flood stage. And once we got the extra rain, it just all broke loose.
In many ways, the summer of '93 never even happened because of all the rain. It was the wettest summer on record, and it seemed that the rain would never stop. In a 45-day period, rain had fallen on 43 of those days. Flooding had already occurred in towns and fields below the Red Rock Dam, towns like Eddyville and Ottumwa.
But one thing for sure is a number of homes have been damaged. Authorities here say it's been the worst flooding in 30 years.
Is there anything else in that house you need that we can go get?
You mentioned that one thing. There's a few things.
This is really worse than the '47 flood.
We might get wiped out. Hope not.
Even though they said the river was coming out, we never truly believed it would come out this bad.
Tough situation. A lot of people lost everything. And that's difficult for people, you know.
The president spent the 4th of July over in Davenport. where millions of dollars in damage had occurred along the Mississippi River.
Thank you so much for being sincere and showing a concern for the damage that we have because of the excess water.
We are going to ask that the producers here receive the same benefits as the people who were affected by Hurricane Andrew and other major disasters last year.
We had seen our share of lost homes and businesses, and the crops, well, in many parts of Iowa, they never even had a chance. You see, by that Thursday in July, we were already used to the phrases like record rains and record losses. Another set of records about to break were the lake levels and outflow levels at Saylorville and Red Rock dams. The outflows were being reported by the hour. And the most important records of all were set that Thursday night. 7 to 8 inches of rain falling again into the Raccoon and Des Moines River basins. Friday morning, the first dramatic pictures of flooding closer to home came in from Ames. Hilton Coliseum was deluged. Water covered the first 12 rows of seats. The home of the Iowa State Cyclones was now home to 12 feet of filthy water. ISU students were evacuated using end loaders. The scenes in Ames were like those we had never seen before. These monuments to sports and entertainment were now simple islands. Few of us in Des Moines thought we'd be seeing similar sights closer to home, but that same morning, some Des Moines residents woke up to flooding as well. In these areas, the evacuations and losses had already started, and so had the fears of what might still be yet to come.
We had to do something in order to start protecting the businesses and residents of Valley Junction.
If the rain doesn't come, the flood won't come, or the flood is coming without more rain.
That night found some residents of the Valley Junction area gathered in an emergency meeting. Flooding in this flood-prone area was possible again, and the residents wanted to know how they could protect their homes and businesses. Plans were made for sandbagging and the usual preparations, but nobody knew how devastated that area would be only 24 hours later.
You're going to have to make decisions on your own, and we just ask that you protect your property.
From the outside looking in, that Saturday morning looked much like any other summer Saturday morning in Des Moines. Sun was shining, farmers markets were buzzing, and the metro area was busy with the Greater Des Moines Grand Prix. But there was a feeling of growing concern as well. You could see the waters rising toward the tops of the bridges in downtown Des Moines. Roads in outlying areas were starting to shut down. The bridges to Johnston were closed as well, leaving that city all but cut off from the rest of Des Moines. So the ironic thing about that day is that one of the sunniest days so far would give way to one of the darkest nights in Des Moines history.
As much as they can, but they want everyone out at 8 o'clock. The National Guard is on the scene. They will not let anyone in this area after 8 o'clock.
It was just real strange, on the one hand being concerned with an event like the Grand Prix, on the other hand realizing what was building. Sarah was doing her live report, and they told everybody as she was on live to get out while she was on live.
All personnel, south of Vine, you must exit immediately, including news personnel.
Yelling at me while we were live on the air, telling me to get out, that the levee was going to go, that it had broken in 2 places and the water was coming, and to get out now. And I think I was like, okay. And it was very scary, and it came up fast.
Just as the water was coming into downtown West Des Moines, I was driving in, everybody else was leaving, and it was pretty dramatic. I mean, everybody was trying to get out. There were a lot of people that were upset, leaving their homes, and the water kept on coming and coming, and pretty incredible sight.
I'd like to stay here, but I don't think there's any way it's going to hold back that long.
It looked like something out of a movie. There were so many National Guards people there, and there were trucks, and they were very nice, but they were on a mission, and their mission was to keep you out of West Des Moines and out of the bad areas.
We just started thinking what we should do, where we should go, how are we going to cover this thing. Its enormity of just the flood damage was just beginning to sink in. It is roughly about 2:30 right now, and to set the scene for you, it is a race against time down here for the businesses along Court Avenue. They are trying to get as much sand as they can to try and save their businesses from the rising waters of the Des Moines.
save our businesses.
It was incredible to see all these people down there sandbagging in the rain. It was just torrential rain, and these people were just in their street clothes. They were sopping wet.
Water's coming through right there.
Yeah, I know. It's coming under the sandbags. That's all right there. Just have him dump that load right here, and we'll just shove it out.
And it was evident that this was going to be something more than just some streets being closed.
We drove up the Grand Prix race course. It was deserted. Lightning was flashing all around. It was still raining. Then on 2nd Avenue, we stopped.
Manholes were popping along 2nd Avenue. We couldn't get up past the river, up around the Birdland area, Union Park area. So we had to go all the way around another direction to get into that area. That was the next part of the city we went to.
We got to get that one shut down, or it's going to backwash us.
About 3 or 4 o'clock, the real lightning struck. I mean, that's when we heard that possibly L.D. McMullen had been flooded out down at the waterworks. He gives us the news that would definitely affect 250,000 people for days and weeks to come.
About 3:30 this morning, we ended up losing the battle of keeping the Raccoon River out of the treatment plant. As a result of the rise, the river flowed into the treatment plant and actually submerged the treatment plant within the river.
At 3 o'clock in the morning, hearing that the water plant had gone down, the first thoughts, once my head cleared, was, oh my God, we don't have water. That is just huge. I mean, they might as well have dropped a bomb on the city as far as impact.
Yesterday, the mayor issued a state of emergency proclamation which empowered the police department to take extraordinary action, remove people from areas where they do not belong.
And it was a frightening situation. Bit by bit, this was all becoming more and more apparent to me, and I think to our viewers, that this was a very serious situation. Des Moines wasn't supposed to flood. Des Moines not supposed to flood. We have Saylorville, we have levees, but Des Moines, you know, not going to get hit by a flood. Oops.
Water is going to be rationed to probably a couple of gallons per person.
While I was flying back from Kansas City, the pilot was listening to some of the radio traffic and that, and he had heard while we were flying back that there wasn't going to be water in Des Moines for 7 days. And when I heard that, I just thought, 7 days? I mean, I thought 1 day would be tough enough. When I heard that we weren't even going to have running water for 7 days, I couldn't believe it, and I didn't know what I was getting into.
It's not a panic situation. I mean, it is for individuals who've had to be evacuated from their homes and businesses, but overall, the city is still under control.
At 4:30 Sunday morning, July 11th, I don't think I could have been more terrified, because I knew that our entire building was without power. We had no way to tell what was probably the biggest story of my lifetime. Yet, within an hour, I think every employee that could have been here was here. We had backup power. We had people on cell phones. We had our general manager at the reception desk. I think we knew that, you know, this was it.
It was old-fashioned television. It was yours truly, a microphone and a camera, and a little later on a cell phone where I could just hold the microphone up to the cell phone, and that's how we were doing interviews for about an hour on the air.
Well, the information was life and death because the water supply was taken out. Typical flood, a few streets, a few houses get hit. But in this case, everybody in our viewing area was affected, almost.
I got into the station about 20 minutes of 7 and realized we were going on the air, so I jumped in and sat down next to Kevin around 7 o'clock that morning and didn't stand up again until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Never has a newscast gone by so quickly. It was probably the most fascinating time spent in an anchor chair and watching history unfold before your eyes. A lot of the times we didn't need to say anything. We just let the pictures do the talking for us. Everybody knew that we'd had as much rain as we could stand. I guess the horrible thing was that we just had to sit here and watch it keep raining and knowing that it was going to affect so many people.
This really was a disaster. I mean, that was not far-fetched by any means to use terms like devastation, disaster, using them over and over again, because that's exactly what it was.
We were all just moving, trying to get that information out to the public to inform them, number one, what was closed down, number two, where they could find water, and trying to explain to them why they wouldn't have water coming out of their faucet and that it was contaminated, that even if they did get a little trickle, not to drink it, not to use it because it was bad, it was contaminated. And getting the information out to the public was the most important thing.
You didn't have to go very far to find a story. You could talk to anybody who was walking the street and they had a story, because everybody was a part of this in Des Moines. Everybody was a part of being affected by this, and everybody was a part of reclaiming our city. And that was another thing that was very heartening about this whole thing.
We sent remote units around, and they were bringing back pictures live, and I was in the control room, that it was hard to fathom. It just went like that all day, one picture after another. The aerials we brought back, it was just unreal.
We slowly pulled up to the West Des Moines Waterworks on a railroad and saw a sea of volunteers sandbagging, working as hard as I've ever seen anybody work. They knew that was the only safe supply of water, and if that went, the whole city would be without water. Sandbags going up all over the area to protect it from the Raccoon River, which is just down the way here over railroad, and the river as yet has not come up here, although there is quite a bit of water, standing water, in areas around here.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's so many people out here. It makes you feel good about the community because you can see all the people who are willing to help and pitch in a hand.
The sheer number of people calling in, offering help, telling us that sandbaggers were needed, that type of thing, disseminating that information. And as soon as we would think of a critical need at home, baby formula, that type of thing, there would be somebody calling. Salvation Army, Red Cross would say, we've got this set up.
First distribution station should be open sometime this afternoon, and certainly as soon as we get that information, we'll get that off to you.
And they do stress not to panic.
Hours had to be set up. If you needed a place to go to the bathroom, I mean, you know, all this stuff was flowing in.
You can use just a small amount of water to use that in your toilet, and also they were talking
Toilets
earlier,
flushing and dumping that bucket and showing people how to do it on the air with about 2 gallons of water all of a sudden didn't become anything that anybody objected to. It's something that a lot of people really wanted to know. They didn't know how to manually flush a toilet. I didn't know how to manually flush a toilet.
We've more than doubled the National Guard personnel that are on duty in just the last 24 hours.
Water is going to be rationed to probably a couple of gallons per person.
We've got a critical situation in West Des Moines right now.
There's no reason for anybody to panic. Nobody here is going to go without any water. It is going to take some time and it's going to take some effort, but there's no question in my mind, working with the city, that we will get this done.
We've received a presidential disaster declaration which frees up federal resources, and we're going to aggressively seek all the federal help we can get. And I want to assure you personally that we'll provide whatever state assistance is necessary, the National Guard, the DOT, any of the state agencies. We appreciate the fact that we have not had any serious problems with looting or things like that because of the good work that's been done in security and also the cooperation of the citizens.
So, day one found a city under siege. Des Moines and the communities served by the Des Moines Waterworks had no water, and hundreds of homes and businesses were either damaged or destroyed. Now add to that the fact that much of the city was still without electrical power. You've got a very dangerous situation. Many people said Des Moines looked like a war zone that night, and in many ways they were right. Not only was there the destruction, but soldiers and equipment from all over the country were dispatched to Des Moines.
And they showed up in all these trucks, and there were just hundreds of National Guards people there and filling sandbags, and you didn't think too much about it until they started evacuating people, and then it seemed like an Army operation.
So much had changed in a mere 24 hours. Even our vocabulary changed as phrases like water distribution site and emergency proclamation became part of our everyday speech. The whole city was affected. And as the business week began, those businesses that weren't flooded out were ordered shut down by the mayor. You see, without water, public health and sanitation were huge problems. But a bigger fear for all of us was fire. How would we fight a major fire with no water in the hydrants? That's exactly what happened Monday night on the south side of Des Moines. Huge tanker trucks filled with water were accompanying the fire trucks on every call. The losses at this fire alone were $1 million. Fearing what might happen if a fire broke out in a skyscraper full of people, most employees were told to remain home all of that week and much of the next. But those businesses that couldn't shut down completely came up with new ways to operate. Some used only skeleton staffs. Staffers took work home or ran their offices from other locations. Still others did shut down, losing millions of dollars in revenue and leaving hundreds of workers without their paychecks. Now, as we said before, at no other time in history has a city this large been without water for this long. That made the flood of '93 national news. And the national media, well, they literally came flooding in.
Good evening. I'm reporting live tonight from Des Moines, Iowa. A city under siege, a city coping with a crisis literally flooding America's heartland. An incredibly large part of the...
They were all here. Time, Newsweek, all the national networks, cable news network, and smaller news organizations from all around the country as well. And they brought the big guns, too. Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, all spotted in the same sandbagging area on Fleur Drive. Des Moines was the lead story for almost a week, and Des Moines was on the cover of newspapers and magazines all across the country. So with all this national attention, could the president be far behind? Not hardly. Apparently, it was the work of Senator Tom Harkin that brought the president to Des Moines. The president had toured eastern Iowa about a week earlier, but Harkin said Mr. Clinton had to come back and see what had happened to Des Moines. Cutting short his Hawaiian vacation, the president arrived in Des Moines Wednesday morning and immediately went aloft for a helicopter tour of the damage.
I've never seen anything on this scale before, and certainly in my lifetime anyway, to my knowledge, there's never been an American city without water that was this large for this long a period of time.
The sights indeed were impressive. From the air, it was difficult to tell just where the rivers ended and the yards and farm fields began. Accompanied by Governor Branstad, the president appeared shocked. But back on the ground, it would be the people of central Iowa who would tell the president the story of the flood of '93. At one water distribution site on the city's south side, some who had come to see Mr. Clinton, others who had come just to get water, were impressed by his presence.
I'm glad he could come. It was really nice to hear that he could sympathize with us. My parents lost their home, and I have not been home for like a week.
Excuse me, sir. Would you go that way after you reach the president?
Can't take it anymore.
Pictures are better than words, but being here in person is even better than the pictures.
It shows that he's concerned, and I think he's going to try and help the people of Iowa with their problems.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Later along Fleur Drive, where emergency sandbagging was still underway to protect the damaged waterworks, the president met with volunteers and even filled a sandbagger, too. I had a chance to spend a few moments and talk to the president about his impressions about the flood and the hundreds of volunteers who were working next to us as we spoke on the Fleur Drive Bridge.
You see all the volunteers here. It's got to be a pretty impressive sight.
Oh, it's awesome. To me, it is the lasting impression I'll have of this whole encounter. These thousands of people here, many of them having suffered losses themselves, others having suffered no losses, but pulling together to try to help their friends and neighbors. It's very moving, and I don't think that people here should be treated any differently than the victims of Hurricane Andrew or Hugo or the terrible storm in Hawaii. I think we ought to do what we can to help put the businesses back and the farms back, and for the people that lost everything in their homes, you know, I can't replace their treasured letters or pictures or mementos, but together we can at least work to help people put their lives back together.
And you've talked to a lot of people today. Has there been one particular person or one story that stuck out?
Well, I think I was most moved by an elderly lady who told me that she had lost everything she had. And I realized that no amount of money could put that back. I imagined, you know, she lost pictures of her grandchildren or her children finishing high school, or maybe a service photo of her son, you know, something like that. You can't replace that. And, you know, about once every 100 years we get a flood of this magnitude that reminds us that we're not in control of our own affairs entirely. And I think we just have to be humble in the face of that and do the best we can.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, dear. Hang
Enjoy Iowa.
Thank you. I always do. Thank you, Don.
In a way, the president's visit gave us all a chance to stop and catch our breath. All of us were affected, but besides going without water from the tap, most of us were doing pretty well. Then tragedy struck. The first and only death associated with the Des Moines area flood occurred when Stephen West, a National Guardsman from Ogden, was electrocuted. He was hooking up emergency communications equipment at the time. All of us will remember this young man who gave his life while helping others try to rebuild their lives. There was still so much work ahead. The water had begun to recede enough now to allow people back into their flooded homes and businesses. From the outside, many of the buildings looked as they had before, except for some mud and the lines marking where the water had been. But on the inside, well, that's another story.
I think probably what hit me the hardest was when I was dispatched to the Muskogee and 61st area, an area that really we didn't hear much about until this day because you just couldn't get to it. I saw people's homes that were literally barely standing.
Absolute devastation to houses, you know. Walls falling in and basements, complete foundations falling away. We went through one house and we went through all of their stuff and all the stuff that was ruined, and you know, it got 3 feet on the main floor.
Anything that they might have had, any personal possessions, completely destroyed. The sludge from the river, just, I mean, keepsakes, wedding albums, graduation pictures. That was what was really tearing people apart.
They had an 8-year-old boy, and the thing that hit him the most was when he went in and found his toys. And he went through the room and he looked through all of his toys, and there's only like 1 or 2 that were sitting up on shelves that he could take with him.
These people, you know, this was their home, and they've, you know, worked all their lives to build their home and to have it the way they wanted it.
I went back into Valley Junction with a boat. I grabbed one of John McLaughlin's 2-man fishing boats, and Sarah and I went into Valley Junction and seen what was left behind after the flood waters went down a little bit. That's dramatic. You know, you see the water and it's real high and that looks real bad and everything, but boy, it's nothing compared to what you see when it goes down. The mud and the junk and the, you know, it just looks like it's ruined, and it takes so long to clean up stuff. You feel so sorry for everybody you see.
The Birdland Park area, where people were allowed back into their homes, and there was a FEMA housing inspector there at the time. And these people were pulling everything out of their homes. Everything was just destroyed. They'd throw it into the garbage truck and you could just hear their lives crack away. But there was this FEMA housing inspector there, and he was going from home to home, and he was condemning many homes. The homes on the south side of the street where we were all being condemned because they were under at least 6 to 7 feet of water. The homes on the north side of the street, some were being condemned, some were not, because they were under 3 to 4 feet of water. And there were some people who were praying to have their homes condemned because they would get more money from the government. And then there were others who were praying that their houses would not be condemned because they've lived their whole lives in that area, and they wanted to stay there, and they wanted to rebuild.
Each one just seems to get worse. I mean, I saw the first one, and I thought that was bad, and it just got worse. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe this. I mean, what are these people going to do? And I walked over to this one woman, and I said, you know, I asked her, do you live here? And she said, yes, I do. And I said, finally, it looks like you got some help here today. And that's the day that the people from St. Paul came in to help, and there was about 500 volunteers that came in. And she said, yeah, nobody really knew about this area before, and we were just trying to do what we could. And I said, it looks like they're helping out a lot. And she said, yeah, they are. And she just got tears in her eyes, and she just reached out to give me a hug, and there's nothing else I could do but hug her back.
You okay? Yeah, I'm better off I don't talk about it.
There were many hugs during the Great Flood of '93, and believe it or not, a little laughter as well. New phrases about Iowa were coined even before the waters had crested. Iowa, a place to row, and waitress wanted, must be good swimmer. And the flood of '93 t-shirts appeared almost as fast. Everything from I survived the great flood of '93 to certified levee specialist.
You may be in a major rush, but if we just be patient, then we all can flush.
Even a ballad about the water, or the lack of it, made it on the radio airwaves, like this rendition from KJJY Radio's Hatfield and McCoy.
Dream. It was L.D. McMullen with a water machine. He said the city's still dry, now don't touch that tap. To see when you get water, just look at the map. We got the zones lettered so you know where you rank. So wait your turn, you'll get water in your tank. What I'm thirsty for is some water to drink.
As the first week wound down, I think I can safely say that we were all exhausted. We had adjusted to sponge baths and water bottles and manual flushing. It seemed that things were beginning to calm down, but the following Saturday morning, day 7 of the great flood of '93, proved to be a setback.
Somebody called, I think Rob, at 9 in the morning and said, we have a levee break, we have a toxic fire, Ames is going to flood. Can you come in? And at the time, I think I thought it was a joke. I was so tired, and I just couldn't believe all this was happening again.
Saturday morning, about 9 o'clock, I sent Kevin out to go get donuts. And he didn't come back, and he didn't come back, and the kids were getting really hungry. And finally, about 10 o'clock, I decided to give them breakfast, and I turned on the TV, and there he was.
About 8:45, one of their levee walkers saw this area washing away in chunks of about, John Bellizzi told me, about 5 feet at a time.
We really feel that we were about a half hour away from losing the entire East Side Business District.
I was able to get right up on top of the levee where it was breaking, and I was about a foot away from the levee. And I took a step back, and it was a good thing I did, because the second I took a step back, that whole section of the levee just fell in.
It was a very critical situation because hundreds of people lived in that area, and so they tried to get people to evacuate as quickly as they could. It was one of those situations where they had to work very quickly. I mean, they were throwing trees on and sand, and they were packing it down, trying to make sure that it was as sturdy as it could be. And then there's a report of a toxic chemical fire in the city. And that was at a place that had earlier been flooded. There was an evacuation area in that place as well. But not only was that a problem, but Des Moines firefighters were working without water.
Okay, Nick, there's your entry team. We got a fireman down. Let's get in there. Let's get in there.
And then Ames was being hit again, and it had been hit earlier. They were sandbagging and trying to fight the floodwaters as well, but it really wasn't doing much good because it was going across Duff again, and businesses were being hit by water once again. And it was one of those situations where people were just shaking their heads saying, what are we going to do?
I have no place to stay. I have no change of clothes. I'm musty. I need a shower. I'm just tired of it.
More bad news would come the following day. With all the progress made at the waterworks plant, we were hoping for good news about our drinking water. Instead, we heard L.D. McMullen deliver a disappointing announcement.
Last night, at about 1 o'clock, we were trying to bring online our little pump that was going to fill the system, and in bringing it up, it failed. And so as a result, it didn't do what we wanted it to do.
I think a short delay is just not a problem. It's unfortunate we had a delay based on the pump, but citizens know what to do, how to handle this, and it's unfortunate, but one day is not a problem.
Now that night, we put together a mini telethon of sorts for flood relief. We weren't sure how well this would work. It had only been a week since the flooding hit central Iowa. We wondered if people were too shell-shocked to respond. Or were we ever surprised? In one short hour, more than $400,000 was raised for flood relief. The phone lines were jammed. There were even people who drove down here to the station to donate because they couldn't get through on the phones. It was a wonderful success, but it turned out to be only a prelude of what would be happening 4 nights later.
Flood Day, broadcast across America.
More than 300 TV stations all across the country carried flood aid broadcast across America. It was a huge production that originated live from the banks of the Des Moines River downtown. The fundraising efforts of this telethon have generated more than $5 million so far.
It is so important. And the church groups, the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, the people who have shown what love is really all about, God bless you.
It is one of those times that it makes you proud to be an Iowan, because the whole country was looking at us. We were the story of the week. Not that I think anybody wanted to be. People looked great.
The lasting image that will stay with me is the looks and the images of all the people who were helping during this crisis. The people who have helped sandbag, the people who have gone to help clean people's homes.
I mean, there were people who weren't affected by this flood one iota, lived in other towns, other states.
It's one of the first times that I really had trouble finding words and had trouble holding back the tears when I saw all the pictures, live pictures of volunteers.
Probably the most incredible thing I have ever seen.
When the dark closes in so hard I can hardly see, and the walls of my fortress of faith crumble in on me, and when it seems like the end, not a measure of strength to spend, I feel the arms of a stranger rescue me.
There are a lot of heroes out there, a lot of heroes that we can't even begin to name, that we didn't even begin to cover and report on. Hopefully they know who they are, because I know we all want to say thank you to them.
There are people from Wisconsin, people from Minnesota, people from Pennsylvania.
It's hard not to cry. You know, things that you saw, good and bad, were so emotional.
Oh, it feels like home with unexpected friends.
We can't do it all, but we can do a little bit.
There's not enough words to thank them, so the only thing I know to do is thank them, and then I've asked God to bless them for everything that they've done.
A soothing balm for the wounds I suffer along the way. A fervent prayer, give you courage and hope for another day. Through the help of my friends, ones I may never see again, seem like angels that were sent by heaven for me. Oh, it feels like home with unexpected friends.
I wanted to do something to help out.
I just came down here with 2 hands and 2 legs. I was gonna do what I can.
This is a chance to really do something for people, so it's a good feeling.
There were thousands of unexpected friends made throughout this crisis, and there's no way we can ever recognize and thank them all. As Molly just said, there were hundreds of heroes as well. One of them, Waterworks General Manager L.D. McMullen, the hero who after 12 days uttered the historic words that Metro residents had been waiting to hear for so long.
It's a real pleasure for me this morning to be able to release Zone A.
The process of bringing our water system online was a very complicated one. The city was divided into zones that were to come online one by one. Without cooperation from everybody, it would take days to complete. But once again, the residents of Des Moines and the surrounding communities came through, and the entire system had running water by the end of only 1 day. Finally, a shower, a flush, a load of laundry. The simple things that we had learned to appreciate the last 12 days. But it still wasn't safe to drink. It would be another week of boiling and bottled water before the all clear could be given.
Well, believe it or not, we've made it. We can drink from the tap. Safe for all consumption. Babies, adults, the elderly, and the young.
That's without a doubt the best news and the biggest news I've ever been able to give.
So the Great Flood of '93 is now history. with all the numbers and statistics entered in the record books. But there are thousands of stories that will never be in those record books, individual moments that each of us will remember when we think of the flood of '93.
You get out of the car and you start walking down there, and there's literally 2,000 to 3,000 people all sandbagging. The whole time Huey helicopters flying overhead.
The Huey helicopter strapped in, standing on the skid, pulling sandbags off down to the National Guardsmen below.
That would have to be the night I didn't work, when we had our second child. So I got a phone call at about 8 o'clock Saturday night. It was our managing editor.
It was a piece that we did the Friday night of the first week of the floods, kind of day 6 or 7. I'm not sure which one it was, day 6. And the story that we told was the story of the floods and the story of the birth of a new little baby who happened to be the new arrival of one of our photographers here at the station.
Best we can.
But what really hit you might say, Lucas, it was the darkest night in Des Moines history. A night of storms and struggles and battling against forces beyond our control. And after a 9-hour struggle of your own, you came into the world at 5:52 Sunday morning, 7 pounds, 5 ounces, 19 3/4 inches long. While your parents entered your name, Lucas Scott Bloomquist, on your birth certificate, many Central Iowans were getting their first look at losses they wouldn't be able to name for a long time. Throughout the days of Sunday and Monday, the loss of homes, personal property, businesses, and most importantly, our water supply. Also on Tuesday morning, Lucas, the rains fell again. Help rushed in from all over the country, and your dad rushed back to the hospital. Seems he got a call you might need some emergency surgery. But the levees held that day, and so did your condition. Meanwhile, I got to tell you about the sandbaggers, Lucas. Thousands of volunteers from all over the place, spending countless hour after hour trying to protect the waterworks and, in some cases, their own homes from even more high water. Then on Wednesday, Lucas, guess what happened? The president came to town. He flew over the damage, visited a water distribution site, those places where we get free water these days. He also listened to the stories of many people who lost everything in the great flood of '93. You know, Lucas, maybe even you'll grow up to be president someday. Now, since all that happened, Lucas, the water has finally come down some. Those people who were evacuated, well, they're starting to get back into their homes these days. It's not good what they see. The water department thinks, well, they can get started on serving the city again with fresh water, maybe by next week. So it's been a long week, to say the least. A week full of tragic endings, but some new beginnings, too, including your own. So, Lucas, welcome to the world. Welcome to Iowa. Welcome to our family. We think you'll like it here, once it dries out. So, here's to you, Lucas, and to all of the Central Iowans, actually people from all over the country, all over the world who were with us in the great flood of '93. Thank you, Central Iowa, for helping us all get through the greatest disaster in our history and get through it together. Thank you for watching.